All right. Is this working? This is my first time doing this on Zoom. So just want to make sure that everything's working here. Welcome to Extinction Rebellion Live. I'm your host, Erinn. Each Friday, I will be having candid conversations with fellow rebels in Extinction Rebellion about the climate crisis, coronavirus, and everything we can do to rebel for life. So, without further ado, I'm going to get my first guest on here, admit him into the Zoom. Hey, Colin. Can you hear me, Colin?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Awesome.
So, this is my friend Colin. He's one of the first people I met in the movement, and he's been doing a lot of cool things with XR in Denver and nationally. So, welcome to XR Live.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Honored to be on this first episode, or episode if that's what you call it.
I know this is truly our maiden voyage right now. So, you're my guinea pig for sure. So I kind of wanted to do this as a way for folks who are at home, which everyone should be, to sort of stay connected with Extinction Rebellion, get to know a bunch of the rebels here in Denver, and also just learn a little bit more about it through personal experience from our personal experience. Because you've been in the movement over a year, I've been in the movement almost a year, and we've learned a lot, I feel like, in this past year. So basically, I just wanted to ask you first, how did you get into activism, and has it always been something you've been interested in?
Yeah, great question. So I've been part of XR, specifically Extinction Rebellion, since last summer when I first moved to Denver, or the Denver area. It's something, activism in general is something I've definitely done for a long time, even in high school, and just gotten more and more into it, more radicalized, and then kind of dove headfirst into Extinction Rebellion. I did study environmental science in college, and one of the things that I learned there is that we already have all the solutions to all these problems, and so we really, the issue is implementing them. And so I wasn't so interested in researching new solutions, and I wanted to, really get into making it happen.
And yeah, and so with making it happen, how does that relate to Extinction Rebellion? Or basically, when you moved here from St. Louis, like, how did you find XR? How did you find the movement? I found the movement at a climate strike. Where did you find Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah, so I was actually living in Washington State about 2 years ago with some friends, and there were pretty radical people living out on this like kind of homestead, a garden, living in the woods basically, and just saw in the news the bridge actions from XR in the UK, and so eventually left there to kind of move to the city to join the fight.
Heck yeah, that's what it was. That exact action too, that bridge action.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Earth Week in 2018 or 20? It was 2019.
No, that would have been 2018 in the fall.
That was Fall Rebellion for the UK.
Yeah, that was that first one, and then they had the much bigger one in this past April, or a year ago now.
Whoa.
I know.
Please. Okay, so also something I was interested in is what draws you to Extinction Rebellion as opposed to other activist groups? There's a lot of great activism going on in Colorado, but what about Extinction Rebellion draws you to it?
For sure. And this is something, I had this draw to wanting to like make a difference. And it was hard for me to get motivated a lot of times, and really until Extinction Rebellion came along. It was really, I think a lot of it is just, talking about this crisis like it's real, because it is, obviously, and not being afraid to do so, and understanding that, yeah, it's really hard, and I think the acceptance of grief within the movement, knowing that, yeah, this really is a hard thing to bear, and it's okay to grieve over the loss or impending loss of so much that we're really accustomed to. And then, yeah, like actually taking actions. I definitely in high school signed a ton of online petitions, even in college. And it's, like, all right, well, didn't feel like I was making much of a difference. And here's this group that's going out willing to get arrested if that needs to happen. And really to, put it all on the line. And that's where I wanted to be.
Totally. Yeah, I think that Extinction Rebellion is kind of saying like our traditional ways of going about taking action on climate that environmentalists have been doing for, decades
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work because nothing's changed. And I think
Yep.
the grief parts, folks can relate to that now that this pandemic's happening because we're grieving our loss of our normal life. In Extinction Rebellion, I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes we get on and we're like, we're kind of a little bit prepared for this kind of grief because this is kind of something we've been expecting. So, as you said when we talked one day, you were like, "Welcome, yeah, welcome to thinking it's the end of the world." I've been thinking it's the end of the world for a while now, so just
Yeah,
come on in, right? So,
absolutely.
one thing I wanted to ask you before we moved on is, what has surprised you about joining Extinction Rebellion? Obviously, like we both knew, like, whoa, Extinction Rebellion shuts shit down. Like they take bold, non-violent civil disobedience type action. But what about it has like surprised you as you've been in this movement?
Yeah, great question. So two things really. One is I didn't have much training before this in nonviolent direct action in VDA. And so just learning like how much more there is to it than what it looks like, how much goes on behind the scenes, and all these different roles. But then even more than that though, is really the community. That's something I really wasn't expecting, that to find this such a strong community here in Denver and on the Front Range, the XR, and kind of the larger movement as well, is just formed a really strong community. And really the way I see that, I think it makes sense when you think about it, that there would be those bonds formed, because we're out here fighting for each other's lives, really, is what it comes down to. And I think that's really powerful. And so yeah, I've made a lot of really great friends, close connections, people that I can trust and count on, and that can count on me to be there for each other, and that's just really powerful.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I did not expect to get like a group of friends out of this, but that's like almost what I've gotten more of has been like this community of friends,
Hmm.
which is really amazing, especially when, in some people's normal lives, they go to work, they go to the bar, and they go home. There's not a lot of, chance to meet a bunch of new folks. And that's really what this is. Folks of all ages, from teenagers to, you know, like much older people who
Yeah.
are out there putting their freedom on the line, their bodies on the line for this cause, which is people who are fighting for their grandchildren and people who are fighting for their future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I feel like everyone watching probably knows that the science behind the climate crisis is pretty freaking clear. Um, we have a banner that says climate change, we're fucked. And sorry for the F bomb, but I mean, it's kind of the situation we're in, but I just didn't want to like not talk about it. So I've seen you do the science portion of our talk, which is called Heading for Extinction and What to Do About It. We do it in normal times. We do it in libraries and in schools, and we educate the public about what's going on. I've heard you do the science portion. So and it just kind of talks about why we need to act now based on the science. So I just kind of wanted to ask you, like, why does 1 degree of temperature rise matter so much when it comes to planetary temperature?
For sure. Yeah, there's really so many different points and specific facts or figures that you could hit. And we talk about the temperature rise, and right now you asked about 1 degree temperature, and this is Celsius, and that is about what we're at right now.
From pre-industrial levels, before we
Yeah,
all started to,
right.
industrialize all this.
Yeah, a little over 1 degree Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels. And so what that does, just in simple terms, is there's just so much more energy in the system, that there's, we have these extreme weather events for one, because there's more energy. And the other thing too is that, life can't evolve and adapt as fast as the climate is changing. If you look at, in the geological record, there have been like pretty great fluxes in temperature, but not really to the time on the time scale that we're looking at right now. We're doing this at a much faster rate. And we have these tipping points and these feedback loops. So as temperature rises, it becomes harder and harder to keep the temperature from rising even further until we get to a point that we're very close to. It's hard to know exactly where that is, but we're very close to that tipping point where there's no coming back from it. Even if we were to stop polluting, stop industrial civilization today, it would just continue.
Kind of like when the Arctic ice melts, what used to be reflecting, like the sunlight used to reflect off that ice, it is now getting absorbed into the dark ocean, and it warms the oceans even further. So that's and then that keeps the ice melting.
Keeps the ice melting, and now you have a lot more ocean that's just sucking in heat instead of reflecting it back straight through our atmosphere. And that's, I think we talk about global warming, climate change. There are different names for what is technically there's differences, but we're talking about the same thing really. But that's really just like part of the problem that we're facing right now. The other part is we're just destroying the ecology of Earth. We have covered up a whole land base across Earth, just about, right? And not just with like actual, human bodies, houses, cities, settlements, whatever. A lot of that space is agriculture. Which is largely these, monocrops, which is not an ecosystem. A monocrop farm is not an ecosystem. And either that or also deforestation, right? So there's just no space for nature to continue to survive. We've expanded, this endless growth we've found the end in pretty much every corner of the world at this point. And then that includes the oceans as well. They've been totally polluted. We've trawling scraped up the bottom of most of the ocean floor. It's pretty insane the amount of destruction that has happened. And we're seeing those effects today, the wildfires that we were seeing last summer.
In Australia, just a few months before this shit all went down, Australia was, 1 billion animals are gone, which is just heartbreaking.
And the Amazon before that.
Mm-hmm. And it's, I think it's good to keep talking about this because it's so difficult to keep that in mind when there's something that feels so much more present. Because the pandemic feels like it's a lot more here and now, but the pandemic and the climate crisis are all kind of interrelated. And we don't really talk about pandemics in our talk, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how these two things may be related.
Yeah, for sure. So part of that is just, like I said before, we've expanded so much that, something like COVID-19 is able to just spread so rapidly. We have this global economy. People are flying all over the world constantly. And I have seen some studies suggesting that like clear cutting creates like hotspots for new viruses. I'm not sure about all that. I haven't looked into it enough, But what really gets me is that right now, it's all kind of the same problem. And right now, with these lockdowns going on, it's really a space for governments and elites to consolidate power with this great excuse of you have to stay home. No, you're not allowed to be outside. There's the park by my house. There's a little office building going in, and they're still doing construction there for some new like businesses and offices. It's like there are things that are clearly not essential that are continuing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a respiratory illness, coronavirus, and we have these fossil fuel like refineries. There's one just north of here that's continuing to operate and continuing to pollute the air and create the most polluted zip code in the United States, which of course is affecting lower income people's, historically oppressed peoples. And so now they're doubly affected by that. And so why aren't we stopping? Why it seems to me that it'd be essential to stop that because of this virus. I mean, it seems to me it's essential to stop it anyways. But I think that, yeah, just this is kind of a dangerous time, in that respect. Although on the other side of that, it can be a powerful time for us as well. I really love all the mutual aid networks that I'm seeing growing and developing around here. If we are able to build these networks and build this parallel infrastructure to provide for ourselves instead of being dependent on these governments that really don't have our best interests at heart, then that is really powerful, and that will allow us to win.
Yeah, I'm seeing here that Josh had a question, and he says, "How has COVID-19 changed the trajectory of Extinction Rebellion, if at all?" And I kind of wanted to answer that because what you were just talking about kind of fits in well, because if at all, I mean, it's changed it a lot. We depend on, for a lot of things that we do, a lot of actions we do, a lot of protests we do, we depend on critical mass, which means a bunch of people, like as many people as possible, getting them into the streets and causing, disruption. And we can't do that right now. So we've really been thinking in XR, like, how can we do what we do without gathering? And that's been something that we've talked about every single XR call. We've been thinking about this, and we keep coming back to it. We got to build the community. This isn't just about shutting things down. Like, the way that you successfully shut things down is by having a strong support network, a bunch of people who are taking care of each other, who are organizing and interlocking. Because in Extinction Rebellion, I'd like to note too, we don't have leaders.
Mm-hmm.
When I mentioned to the group that I wanted to do this, they said, "Go ahead, you should do it. Like, nothing's stopping you, because you are a leader, as am I, as is everybody that is in this group. We do horizontal organizing, so there's no one in charge." So it's all about making these connections with each other, because we will form these little hubs and spokes that sort of work together to make really cool things happen. So without that, we've been having to think less about action and more about, I think, connection, so that when we can gather again, we're like busting open the gate to get there with tons of people behind us. So
Right.
I guess it has changed our strategy a lot, but just like everybody, we're sort of like trying to roll with the punches and figure it out as we go along, just like everybody else who's dealing with this crazy situation that is a once in 100-year pandemic.
Right. I totally agree with that. And, there is a lot of focus on building community and like the mutual aid, like I was saying. As far as like actions that are happening or might happen soon, that concept you mentioned of critical mass, the idea there is like there's enough people together that you're protected because you're in this, the numbers protect you, right? And so if you're only allowed to be out in like these small groups, then you're very vulnerable to getting picked off by the police. So what a lot of people have been talking, and there's allegedly some planning for this, is going to more like guerrilla tactics. And to be clear, that still means nonviolent tactics. It just means not being out in the open about what you're doing. So like guerrilla marketing, for example, is something that people are focusing on right now, getting that mess so we can still get our message out.
So we've been talking about nonviolent direct action a lot. And I kind of wanted to touch on that because when I joined Extinction Rebellion, I had no idea what NVDA was. I like obviously knew about famous protests like civil rights movement, suffragette movement, things like that. And I think when I think NVDA, I think of that guy. I think maybe it was in can't remember exactly which protest it's in, but he's holding a flower and there's a big tank coming towards him. He's holding like this flower in the tank's path. Do you know what photo
I
I'm
was
talking
talking about, I don't know about the flower. I mean, there's Tiananmen Square holding a tank, just doing, that's direct action, and that's one person. I think he was holding a grocery bag even.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just standing out there. Yeah, and that's the thing, that it really sometimes only takes a really small number of people to make a big change. And I think using that example, what I think is really powerful about that, and what can be powerful about NVDA in general, is that you're out there showing a willingness to sacrifice, showing like this really matters this much to me, that I'm willing to sacrifice something. Maybe it's liberties, maybe it's your life in some cases. That's has happened, in the civil rights movement, and it's happened in other places. I don't think that's happened in Extinction Rebellion, but definitely, sacrificing some liberties, going to jail, it's not a fun experience, but it's something partially like I'm willing to do if that's going to make the change necessary.
Right. And so that kind of leads into my next question, which is what kind of nonviolent direct action have we done in XR this past year? And what was planning like for those actions? And I'm asking you kind of knowing because I was sort of there too, but I just kind of like to get your perspective on like, what have we done as Extinction Rebellion that maybe people have heard of or not heard of?
For sure. And I'll just say right off the bat, I don't know what planning is like, because no one plans direct actions. People just kind of show up all at the same time and happen to, be coordinated. There's no planning, because that would be conspiracy. So
that's right. Yeah,
right.
I forgot that we don't plan. I forgot about that.
But things that have happened, we've had die-ins at certain places, which just go and kind of lie on the ground, pretend to die for a bit. We've done that allegedly at city council. There went up to sang a song to the front and lay down for half an hour while they talked about some ridiculous stuff that was of no importance, and got up. There's street theater has been pretty awesome. Street theater, actually. There's some people made these clock faces, these like red robes with these big like clock faces, and then a sign that says like out of time. And I've used those in the public. Went and used it at the Air Quality Control Commission meeting.
As well as Pearl Street Mall and 16th Street Mall.
Yep, for sure. And then road blockades. And so we've had soft and hard blockades. So soft blockade meaning like they're easier to deploy. You kind of just walk out in there into the road and stand there. There's one last April. There was some last September that there were 8 people arrested on September 23rd, 2019. And so the way that one worked is just walk out into the crosswalk when the light's green, and then when the light turns red, just kind of stay there. for a light cycle, and then when it turns green, move on. So it's causing, minimal disruption, but it's getting the message out there. And especially because the police decided to arrest, and they kind of, it wasn't really warranted, but they decided to. And you know what? Like, we got a bunch of press because of it.
Totally.
And then there's hard blockades, which means like going out and locking down to something. So back in on Black Friday, November 29th of 2019, we had an action at the Cherry Creek Mall, which is like the ritzy mall in Denver. And, on the busiest shopping day of the year. And right in the middle of that, I allegedly, with 3 other people, went out into the road with a giant like sleigh that was like made of like, iron, like pipe, and allegedly like put a bike lock around my neck. And we shut down the road for 3 hours, and we waited for the fire department to come. The police were there, but they have no idea what they're doing. So the fire department came and eventually got us out. So those are some of the things. And then, yeah, like I said, we've kind of moved to some guerrilla actions. Those have been happening just as marketing. And I will address, planning for this stuff a little bit. And this is one thing that's really inspiring to me is, it's just people stepping up. It's people stepping forward. Something needs to get done. Someone steps forward and does it. And we do, like, as a community. And if someone's like taking on too much, there's like a norm within our culture of like, hey, like, it's okay. You don't take that on. Like, let someone else take that. And so everything that's happened is really just people seeing a need and stepping in to fill it.
Totally. And I feel like we are great at empowering people to do what they want, what they're comfortable with, and what they have energy for. Because, I think it's rad that you were allegedly locked to a sleigh in the middle of a busy street on Black Friday, because Black Friday is the dumbest holiday in existence. But, some people might hear that and be like, I can never imagine doing that in my life. Is there a place in Extinction Rebellion for someone like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. There were 4 of us there that got arrested that day. And like I said, was the youngest person was 18, and then the oldest person, I'm sure, in her 60s, I think. So we have this range, and it's all community. But then there's so many people. The other thing that was happening during that time is people were just rallying over, like, a few blocks away, just having this rally
That
that,
was totally legal. Very legal rally.
yeah, very legal rally, and very distracting rally to the police. They kind of thought that's all that was going to be happening.
Mhm.
And so, which is what allowed us to allegedly get into the street and lock down. But then there's also people that, like, with that action, let's say there are people that helped out with the messaging for it beforehand. Like, there are people that put a lot of work into that action that weren't even there that day, right?
Mhm.
That weren't on the site at all.
Yep.
And then there are people taking roles, like police liaison, like, being the one person to interact with the police, or someone to interact with the media, someone or people to make sure that, the people actually locked down are okay. And then besides, like, the specific actions, like we were talking about before, these parallel infrastructures, if you're able to provide just basic necessities for people in the movement, then that's really powerful. I personally have benefited from that and been able to dedicate a lot more time and energy towards this movement, because I've been able to actually live rent free for a little while now, which which I'm super grateful for. And I wouldn't have been able to do nearly as much towards furthering the movement if I didn't have that.
Yeah, so there's like people that can support, bring food. We have art builds consistently where we
Yeah.
make these buttons, and this shirt is where I made, it was at an art build. I got into this movement as a musician. I'm still a musician, but the need that was there for me was we need a music group. And I didn't know anything about the movement, but I started there, which, music group, we wrote, parody carols for Black Friday, where we switched out the words from Christmas carols and made it about the climate crisis. And it was super fun, hilarious. We had a blast doing it. We write a bunch of songs for the movement. So that's how I've been involved in a very, non getting in the street, putting yourself on the line kind of a way. We also need folks like at every action, we need food, we need water, we need warmth, we need rides. Like, one of the things that I did at our last big action was I helped give a ride from the jail to someone's car or their home. Because there's jail support is huge. That is a huge job. I now know firsthand that being on jail support is a huge job. We did this action at the Colorado State Capitol on January 9th. And we brought attention to fracking at Governor Polis's State of the State address, because Polis is, he's not willing to stop fracking, even though that's one of our big carbon emission problems in Colorado and a big health risk for people who live near the sites. So we disrupted that speech, brought the attention to fracking. The Sunrise Movement was involved, and 38 people were arrested. So all of a sudden, jail support's like, holy shit, we have to call 38 people's emergency contacts. And we had this list. One of our rebels made the most organized, beautiful list at the jail. And we were just like, every person that came out, we're like, okay, like, do they have a ride? Are they cool? And like, there was people that brought bags of bagels and cream cheese and veggies and fruit. And just like, we fed those people that came out of jail. And I know that particular night was not a great night for everybody in jail. It was the stories I've heard, and, jail is nothing to laugh at. It's nothing to take.
No.
There's people who are incarcerated for years who should not be there. And I don't know. So it's definitely, it's an emotional experience, but at the end of the day, you're like, this community is so large. There's such a need for everybody and their expertise. And that's what's really cool about Extinction Rebellion, I think, is no matter what you're good at, you can join and we can use you. If you want to get arrested, great. If you don't want to get arrested, great. We need both. What would happen if everybody in XR got arrested? It'd be pretty friggin' bad. So
yeah, absolutely. There's any skill or talent you have, anything that you can do or provide is necessary. And yeah, I'll just second jail support. As someone who's benefited, I've been to jail with XR and with another group, and jail support. I'm so grateful for having jail support and having that community support. It makes it so much easier. And yeah, going to jail it's not a pleasant experience, and it's still a lot easier for like me than some of the people that I was there with that are really getting screwed over by the system.
Right. Like, I think, like, to speak frankly, like, I'm a young white woman, like might get treated better based on the color of my skin by police, by law enforcement. I don't have that fear of police the way someone of color might, for like huge reasons, because there's a problem of police brutality in our country. So it's sort of like, that I think one thing we do in Extinction Rebellion too is we look at our privilege. We look at how we can be useful, and we recognize that some people may be more able to get out there and risk their liberties than others, and that is all okay. And also, I wanted to bring up too that nonviolent direct action is not just something that you start doing. We have trainings. I know you've hosted a few of those trainings. Can you speak a little bit about those trainings and what we do at them?
Yeah, so I've hosted. I've not actually been the one giving the training so much. Well, I've helped some places, but yeah, it's really. A lot of it is. It's just nice to like understand the basics of what NVDA is all about. So it's not just this totally foreign concept. But some of the things that will be covered in an NVDA training include the different roles involved, which I mentioned a few of those, like police liaison and having jail support and media liaison, maybe like deployment support. There's just and there's more. And maybe a lot of times we'll practice actually being what it's like being maybe it's you practice like a soft blockade, like you're in the road and have some people come up and be like these angry bystanders yelling in your face, because that happens sometimes. And that's something to note also. Like we're not doing this to be a hero or to be liked, because that's not going to happen. So just like getting ready for that and being mentally prepared for what you're getting into is super important. I think those trainings are super helpful. I go to all of them that I can. I actually was arrested back in September on the 19th, and it was totally unexpected. And while the police escalated the situation, and I'm not blaming myself for this, but I could have been better at de-escalation, and that's something that a lot of times work on in these training is how to de-escalate. And so that's why I kind of started going to these all the time. Is I want all the practice I can get, so that I can do this and have the best effect, and get the most leverage out of any action that I'm going to be a part of. And it really teaches you how to do that.
Yeah, I'm so glad I went to one of those before I did my first soft blockade. Because,
Mm-hmm.
when we started those on September 23rd, we were like, oh, yeah, this is, we're not expecting arrests. And then they came in so quick. And I was told, don't say anything to the police. That's why we have police liaison, stay calm, and that really helped, because when there was a 6'5", 250-pound police officer shoving me, I just relied on the training, right? And I think about that for performing too, when there's a huge crowd yelling and you're nervous, you have to rely on the practice you've done for years. And it's kind of the same way. If you don't practice something, how are you going to do it in the moment? So we kind of make sure that everybody who does those has been to a nonviolent direct action training. And we also, at those, we form affinity groups, which are just sort of like small groups of folks from similar geographical areas and similar level of risk they're willing to take in terms of when we do actions. Low risk meaning I'm not really interested in something like locking down, but that's for sure going to be arrestable. But I do want to be somewhat involved in those actions. And then those affinity groups, their whole goal is to get to know each other, to form that circle of trust with each other, so that you can pull off actions as a group, or you can lock in with other groups. That's kind of how the Capitol 38 protest formed. Two affinity groups had a very similar idea, came together and made this crazy thing happen. So affinity groups are pretty freaking cool. And that's something that happens on nonviolent direct action training as well.
Yeah, I really like the concept of affinity groups that I was introduced to through XR first. And just to clarify that point, if it's not necessarily that everyone needs to be okay with locking down themselves, but more of that's something they're willing to support. Because like we said, there's so many ways to support, and really the really heart and soul of an affinity group is that trust, that you're really trusting each other to a degree that you don't see in normal society so much, because you need to. The repercussions if you don't trust someone, or if something happens, then and you're out there theoretically planning to lock down this road, shut down what someone might call critical infrastructure, then that can end up getting further charges against you, and you could end up like going to jail for a lot longer than you would have, or maybe you wouldn't have at all. And so really finding those people that you trust so well is really critical to growing this movement. And we have formed these affinity groups at trainings before, but I don't want to anyone watching this, like, you can go, like, your friends, the people if you already trust people, like, get together, start talking about this crisis, start building trust with each other, even more so, and talking about this crisis like it was real, and then you can take action from there, like from within that affinity group. And then the other really cool thing about affinity groups is that if we have lots of them, then it really limits the risk of infiltration, because we know that is something that the government is going to try and do. Like at the Black Friday action, there was a police officer in the crowd trying to blend in.
Not very well.
Not very well from what I heard. Which is fine. But that is something the DPD has a history of, and the federal government, like the FBI, certainly has a history of doing that. So if you're working within groups that you really trust, then you're really increasing your own safety. Plus, it's so good to like have that community. It's something we don't have in this culture very much, and having that community is just really powerful and empowering.
Yeah, I really want to talk about regenerative culture next week. Is my plan to have our friend Salamander on if she wants to talk about regen, because I think regenerative culture is so important right now. That's kind of what we're all being forced to do anyway. So we can get into that next week. A little teaser for next week.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to note, because all this may sound pretty overwhelming to someone who's not used to it. I just want to note, one, that we have legal observers on site at every action who are there to look after us. We have lawyers who work pro bono to represent us in court. If someone has a court date, other people from the community show up and support them, show the judge that they are a great person and they did this for a greater cause. And then just one last thing about nonviolent direct action is, so someone listening right now or later on when this video is just like out in the world might be like, okay, like I believe that climate change is real. I believe it's going to be a burden on myself and detrimental for my children. I believe that the government hasn't taken action with it and we need to. But also, like, I go to work, I come home, I have my family, like, why should I, put in the effort, the extra effort it takes to get together and do these direct actions? Why is this so effective?
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the problem, is that we live in this, this wage economy where you're forced to go to work just to put food on the table, because the U.S., we're here in the U.S., so I'll talk about that. The U.S. government has systematically removed the ability of people to support themselves from the land. I mean, that was a large part of the American genocide, is like killing the buffalo and the salmon so that the Native Indians couldn't support themselves to fight back. And that's how, now in the cities, we're not able, food comes from a grocery store and you need money, that you need your job. So, that is part of the problem. But what I'll say is, like, it really is the hard part. And I don't have a way to sugarcoat it, because, that climate change is reaching its end game. And the whole industrial civilization that we know about is reaching the end point. And so really it's a matter of, do we just keep going on business as usual and allow that collapse? And the longer we go on with business as usual, the harder that crash is going to be? Or do we do something now to try and soften that crash? And it's a matter of the short-term loss that we see, and is totally understandable, just a lot of times outweighing that long-term gain in people's minds. But in the end, this crash is, this society is going to collapse on itself. That means there's going to be starvation, like our agricultural system that is totally messed up, but that's going to fail, and we're not going to have food to feed people. There will be more war, rape, genocide. And so that's why, going back to the start of this, why I really liked Extinction Rebellion is the acceptance of grief. It's okay to talk about this stuff, and like even just saying it to you now is hard, right? But being able to talk about that is really powerful, and it goes against. That's just talking about that is fighting back, honestly. And building these communities where we can, putting our faith, instead of in this system we know is collapsing, put our faith in each other, put our faith in the earth and the land's ability to provide for us, and the people we love, put our faith in those people to support each other. And that's really the best we can do.
Totally. I mean, one of the things that brought me to this group, or what brought me to the climate strikes, I should say, is that I had this overwhelming sense of fear and helplessness. Every day I'd wake up, I'm like, I remember, like, it's weird because it just has not happened in the same way since I've joined XR. It really hasn't. I remember I was touring in the UK last year with my band, and I'd see these articles about, biodiversity loss and the coming dangers and the dangers that are here right now. And I just became overwhelmed with fear, overwhelmed with grief, with nowhere to put it. It just seemed like it would just weigh on me day and night, to the point where I would feel immobilized, like for a whole day, I'd feel like immobilized by terror and fear. Ever since I've joined XR, I swear to God that has gone away. And it's been replaced by determination and action and connection. Because I think in XR, we have this space not only to grieve, but to see, like, this isn't the only way that our society can be structured. Like, this is just one of a million ways that we could structure how humans live on this planet. We've picked a particularly destructive way that is focused on a concept of exponential and endless growth. And what also likes to exponentially grow are fucking viruses, And it's just like, I mean, I'm not all like, the virus is us, but in a way I'm kind of like, we are kind of a virus on this earth. We're meant to be here. We're not, we're a part of the natural world. We're not different from the earth. We are of the earth. The earth bred us. We are in connection with the trees, the dirt, flowers, the air, the clouds. Like, we're all part of the same thing, but us humans like to think that we rule it, and I think that we can, in XR, we imagine a world where people don't feel that way, where people feel more connected to the earth, each other, and we can live in a way that is more harmonious with the natural cycles of Earth and of our planet. We don't know any other way but this planet. One of my friends is dedicated in getting people to Mars, but I don't want to go to Mars. I really don't want to go to Mars. It looks terrible there. It doesn't look fun at all.
For sure. And, I absolutely get that. I was totally, when I was living in Washington, I was like going out there to escape. And after a while, I was like, I couldn't just hide away. I need to come and fight back. And it really is. And it's not humans in general, although it is most humans, but it's our culture, which has this culture that has covered the whole planet now. And there are people that left that still know how to live in right relation with the earth. And so it's really coming here and just finding people that are okay with rejecting this culture. It's all we've known. Like you and I, like, or well, I'll just speak for myself. Like growing up, I grew up in the city, and this dominant culture that is killing our planet is all I knew. And it was such a relief to find people that were also understood that, yeah, this culture, we're murdering this planet, and in doing so murdering ourselves and our friends and loved ones. And it can't be. And even though, I don't know personally, I don't know how to live in right relation. I don't know all those ways. I don't know how to support myself if I maybe a little bit. But most people, like, if there's not food at the grocery store, um, don't know how to survive. But the thing is, we're not going to survive anyways. And I'm willing to reject this culture and try to. And there's two things you have to do: is one, reject that, and try to get rid of this culture that is destroying those planet and is threatening the extinction of the human species, as well as most of the rest of life on Earth. But at the same time, building up these systems of liberation and ways to live in harmony with each other, with yourself, and with the Earth. So that there is, if we win, that there's a potential for humanity to continue in right relation.
Right. Yeah. I kind of want to, maybe I should have done this at the beginning, but I just want to remind anybody watching about Extinction Rebellion's 4 demands, which I remember because we made a song out of it. Number 1, tell the truth. It isn't hard to do. So for the government, number 1, our first demand is for governments to tell the truth about the climate crisis, and for the media, the government, everyone to work together to make that threat known to the American public. Honestly, what state and local government are doing with the pandemic, I mean, they're saying, like, science says this, so we need to do this. The president may not be saying this, but well, I don't know. Well, you feel like, you seem like you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it just shows that this pandemic really just shows that we could have been doing this all along. This things could we could have shut down this infrastructure, and we still can. There's still, like I was saying before, there's still stuff going on that didn't need to be. But we have the capacity to support, at least in the United States, we have the capacity to support everyone here. There's more food and clean water more than enough for everyone here. It's just that most of it is wasted. And like I said at the beginning, like, for every issue there is, we have solutions for it. We just need to take action. So that goes to, like, the demand number 2, which is act now.
Mm-hmm.
That this really is very urgent, and we need, the demand specifically, especially in the United States, which is responsible for so much of the harm caused around the world that's happening now and in the past, is a carbon neutral society by 2025. So in 5 years, and that's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
It honestly seems so much more possible now that we're all locked down and not doing anything, yet food continues to flow in the supply chain, and the government can pay us, hopefully, to stay home, which is what they should do, and not to bail out Wall Street. And like, it didn't seem possible. Like, I of course want it. That's our demand. We, carbon neutral by 2025. I believe in that demand. That has to happen. But I didn't know how it was going to. And now I'm like, this is how, a lot of work can be done virtually. Yes, like, it kind of sucks to have all of our interactions virtually, but we can find the folks in our communities where we can take a bus or ride our bike to their homes to share food and share music and converse. We can, go to the schools that are closest to our houses. We can kind of like restructure society so that we're not using fossil fuels to do everything for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know
Mm-hmm.
obviously we're still using fossil fuels right now. And actually, that brings me into what I wanted to talk about next. Because we're in a current situation that we've never been in before, as in the as this generation of 100 years, we've never experienced this. So seen a lot of things on social media, like, look at nature coming back, dolphins in the Venice Canal. And I've personally experienced on my walks around the neighborhood, like, there's lots more bird song. The
Mm-hmm.
air smells cleaner. I can see
Mm-hmm.
Denver from where I am in the foothills, and it does seem like the earth is taking a breath. But I think the thing to remember is that once this thing's over, the government is going to go full send, like, back into the old ways, and everything that got cleared up, all the pollution that got cleared up, all the animals that are feeling brave enough to step back into their normal spaces in our neighborhoods, everything's going to go back to the way it was. But we're going to have a recession. So it's going to be like, not only are we going to burn a bunch of fossil fuels, but there's no way economically we can be in the same position. So it's like, we're not going to, the good parts about this aren't going to last unless we demand it. So kind of wanted to touch on some things that are going on. Like, I've heard about the government rolling back EPA regulations while all of us are consumed with the news about coronavirus. And we just think that because planes aren't flying and cars aren't driving, that this problem is solved. But the government is using this opportunity to pass some seriously scary legislation.
Yeah.
You talked about how certain state governments are starting to ban pipeline protests.
Yeah, so I think there was South Dakota, West Virginia, and Kentucky, I believe, that passed legislation that, like, outlawed any protest against. I don't know the specific language, but it was like against pipelines. There's specifically worried about a second sort of DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline, happening. That protest back in like mostly 2016 timeframe, that was just incredible and so inspiring. But yeah, like, we're here stuck at home, and they're able to pass this legislation on the down low, that when we are able to get back, like, it's going to be harder to make these reforms, or sorry, not reforms. I don't like reforms, but to take action. And yeah, like you said, there are, like, people aren't driving and planes aren't flying, and that's a huge thing. But that's individual use of like carbon is not the biggest factor as far as carbon pollution. I mean, like, our military, like, right there is such a massive polluter. And the whole purpose of the military with this cycle, the whole purpose is just to get more oil, right? And to get more resources, but in general, but oil is the main one. And then they're the ones burning so much of it. So even though we're stuck at home and it's quieter here, that doesn't mean that the earth isn't still being assaulted.
Right. And I think that shoot, what was I just gonna say? Oh my gosh, I can't remember. The dogs that
Well,
distracted me, they woke up from their
yeah. Well, something else I was gonna say.
yeah, do you
That
make nap?
yeah, that you were talking about. When we come back out of this, we're looking at likely having a recession, or something Great Depression scale. So I'd say, like, right now is especially at this time is a really great time to plant a garden, right? And start trying to learn how to grow your own food,
Or mend your own clothes.
mend your own clothes, all of that. Yeah.
All that sort of, like, those basic skills that we've lost touch with because of mass industry, we can kind of start to cultivate. And oh, here's what I remember what I wanted to say. So, there's always this whole thing of like individual choices, like, well, you should choose not to use the straw, or you should have enough money to buy the electric car. And it just puts all this stress on all of us to like go vegan and be zero waste. And if you're not perfect, then you failed. And it's this shame. It's the same exact shame cycle that you go through with dieting and image. And it's like, I need to look this perfect, but I can't. So I'll just eat the cheeseburger and I'll feel even worse about myself. And it's like, these individual shame cycles keep us trapped. They keep us down.
They keep us distracted, I would say, because, you can get an electric car, or you can bike everywhere, right? You can have like net negative carbon emissions on like personally, and that isn't going to bring down this system that is actively destroying our planet, right? And so, I think if you want to not use plastic straws, if you want to bike everywhere, if you want to just other things, use less water, which a lot of that comes down to what's on your plate, is how much water you're using. Like, awesome, that's great. Do it because it's the right thing to do. It's like ethically the right thing to do, but don't do it because you think that that's gonna like solve all the problems. Don't think that that's gonna bring the system down, because it's not. The system, it's just not. Like, we have to go on the offensive from this. It's not just like defending, like protecting this last forest here from being logged. Like, we have to like really cut to the heart of this system and stop it at the base.
Right. Like, I mean, so when we do events, we generally have vegan food available. Like, we're, because we practice, we want to practice what we preach. It's like, animal agriculture is is a carbon emitter. It's terrible to animals. It's not natural. It's very, it's a mass industry, just like the fashion industry or whatever. And so, in principle, like, vegan choices are good, but am I going to hate myself if I'm here, like, taking care of someone's house, watching their animals, and they have a chicken in the fridge? I'm going to eat the chicken, like, because, and also I'm just trying to survive. We're all just trying to survive. And the problem with environmentalism and these individual choice things is, like, a lot of people can't afford to go zero waste, to go green. What they can afford is a meal from McDonald's. And not acknowledging that is not acknowledging the fact that that's why you can't just rely on just like individual choices to make sure that this happens, because people can't afford that. They don't have access to fresh fruits and veggies and certain food deserts.
Yeah. And I think that the fact that it's so much more expensive to buy organic, or just to like live more sustainably in general, I think that's just disgusting. Because really, the only reason it's cheaper to just go to McDonald's and to participate, we're talking about food, to participate in this industrial agriculture, it's because it's subsidized. It's our tax dollars going to make that cheaper, even though really the sustainable food, which you can grow food without using pesticides, just on a much smaller scale and without paying for a USDA organic label. You can do all that and have even greater production of food from the land, from farming, and be mending the land, like growing soil, right? And so it really shouldn't be more expensive, but we have systems in place to keep it that way and to keep people from being able to support themselves.
Yeah, because if you go to like, if you go to like Native Foods or something and you get yourself like a kale salad and it's like $12, it's like kale, tomatoes, seeds, cucumber, and like lemon vinaigrette or something, and like seitan chicken. Yum. But like, why is it $12 and a McDonald's burger is $2 when a cow is this giant animal you must feed? Like, it's not just like vegetables just fucking grow and you pick them. Cows, you have to feed them as well, which a lot of land is used to make food for the cows. So it doesn't make any sense why a burger would be $2 and a kale salad would be 12, if unless something's being subsidized, which is exactly what you're saying. So I think recognizing the absurdity of some of these things, like it's absurd that we make all this food and waste it. That's absurd. It's absurd that we have people fly into business meetings that could easily be done on Zoom. There's just like a lot of absurdity that has become so normal. And I think in Extinction Rebellion, we're constantly uncovering those and saying like, why do we think this is normal? You know, and then we try to convey that to the public. So in our last few minutes here, I want to take a few questions. So if you have a question out there, feel free to ask. Here's a question from Jesse. They say, what's the coolest action y'all have seen from XR or any activist group recently?
Ooh, boy.
Can you think of anything?
Real recently, I mean, there was the that State of the State address, that Capitol 38. I thought was pretty rad. I actually wasn't there for that one. I was out of town, so I thought it was really cool, especially because I was out of town and stuff was still like happening. I was yes, like this is great.
Like, this is a horizontal structure. I don't need to be the only one that's pulling the weight of this. There's, and you know, a lot of the people that you would think of as leaders of this group weren't a part of that action because everyone was sort of burnt out from Black Friday, I think. And then this whole new crew just came up and was like, let's do this. And so it's kind of like we regenerate ourselves in that way. Like some people do an action, get kind of like, you know, even in regular day-to-day stuff, like we're doing this today. Tomorrow, maybe I'm like, I don't feel like getting on an XR call today because you can seriously be on an XR call every day of the week if you want to.
Right.
But then other people will call and plan something. So there's always like something's cropping up. And so it's not, I forget about this because with my band, it's all me, right? If I don't do something, nothing will happen. But with XR, it's the coolest thing because I can do what I'm good at and I can do stuff and then I can step back and it's still going and things are still happening. And it's very cool in that way. So,
and with that action too, I'll just say like the fact that all the charges were dropped is just like amazing. Like their pressure put on the DA and they dropped all of those charges.
And that Bernie Sanders tweeted about it on his show. Like, you know, Andrew wrote like I know for a fact it was one of our XR people called Andrew Romanoff and Andrew Romanoff called Bernie Sanders and like nice. I think she said like this is old ladies knowing people or something is what she said, how Bernie Sanders like tweeted us out. Like everyone is just connected in these interesting ways. And we have people that are very involved in the political side of things like that are, I mean, we're apolitical as a group technically. But there's people who have spent their entire lives lobbying and being activists in political spaces, you know, you know, campaigning for environmentally friendly candidates since, you know, whenever. And so they have these connections into that realm. Like we had a member of Denver City Council on one of our calls. So I think that's really cool that like, even though we're apolitical, like we obviously have to get political in a way and we have to, and I also like one of the best things about Capitol, there were so many amazing things about that day that I'll never forget. It was the most vivid, one of our vivid days in my mind. But the fact that we were protesting a Democratic governor, I think that's so cool because I think you would expect this kind of thing from the opposite party. We're like, I voted for Governor Polis, you know, like I'm a registered Democrat. Not everybody is. And I'm just putting it out there that I am, mostly from like just being raised as a Democrat, I think. But so I voted for him and here I am protesting him because he's not doing enough for climate. And that's what's really cool about that action is like, yeah, we got a Democrat in, but it's like if we elect a Democrat, if we elect an independent or whoever, it's not going to get done what you need them to get done because we need to move the Overton window about what's possible. That's what Extinction Rebellion is doing. We're not operating within the lines of what's possible. We're actually saying like there's so much more that's possible and we need to push y'all to think that way.
Right. And that's, being beyond politics, which is part of the third demand, is it doesn't mean that like we're saying there's not like politics don't exist and politicians don't exist. But saying like we're not going to be working through those channels, those political channels, because that's a way to change things that we're allowed to do. And if we're allowed to do that, that's only because it's not going to make a real difference.
Right.
And so we're going in. And being creative. That's another thing I love about XR is it's all about creativity. What can we do? And I'm just always amazed with the ideas that people come up with.
Yeah, same. And it's like there's like this, there's things about XR that are going to happen that we'll be like surprised to see. We will be like, wow, that was such a crazy thing someone thought of. What a cool idea. Like we need everybody to come into our movement and give us their take on it. Like you literally, if you're listening right now, you don't have to ask me or Colin, hey, can I go do this thing? Like you can go do it. And so with that, I just wanted to end on the last two demands. And I know we could talk for literally hours about like, especially the fourth demand, but I just wanted to touch on them so everybody knows. So the first two were tell the truth. The second was act now. The third is people's assembly. So can you kind of just talk about that? I mean, that's an interesting one, but I just wanted to touch on it.
Right. So the People's Assembly is a form of direct democracy that we're arguing for. It's a tool we can use because, right, we rightfully so, I would say, do not trust our government to make the changes that need to happen because they haven't, even in the glaringly obvious facts right in front of them. So that would be, you'd have a random set of people that you would pick, from and like filling in certain demographics. It would most likely in the U.S. go through the like our mailing system, and it's a way to like let the people decide the path forward. So next year, we're not saying like this is the one way, like this program or this program is how we get through this. We're saying we're going to let the people decide. And that's what organizing in XR is all about. It's organizing for power, organizing for people power, like giving power back to the people / like making people realize their own power, and then using that. Because if we all realize our own power, the government and the elites, like they can't do anything to stop us.
Right. I mean, if you think about the civil rights movement, like that was people power because the government wasn't giving people their right that they deserved to vote, to be equals, to just the right to what we talk about this country being all about. They didn't have that right. And they were finally like, we have the power to demand this. And through lots and lots of people power, they were able to achieve that. And of course, it's still a struggle. It becoming more equal, becoming a fair society, it's still a struggle, which is why in the U.S. we have the fourth demand.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth demand is really, really important. They don't have it in the UK. Just want to point that out. They don't have it in the UK, but we have it in the US. What is our fourth demand?
So our fourth demand is a just transition. So we demand a just transition through this crisis, transitioning from this industrial civilization that we have that is currently failing to whatever is on the other side. But for the whole history of industrial civilization, and just in the US, certain people have been oppressed. The American Indians have this country is founded on the genocide of American Indians, the slavery of Black people. There's a whole history of oppression, and as this crisis gets worse, those are the people that will be hit the first and hit the worst. And it's not just that. There's like homeless populations are also what we call like frontline communities. And so we want to prioritize those frontline communities through this transition, so that it's not just the same people in power now. Like, even if in the end, yeah, like all of humanity goes extinct, if we continue like this, that it's not like those people continuing to inflict suffering, because really everything we do right now is going to help out. And there is a real possibility, like, with climate changes, temperature and global warming, as temperatures rise, and we have like certain areas, like down in Mexico, it gets too hot to live, right? These becomes like a death zone essentially. And then you have people from Central America coming up because the US invaded their country and displaced those peoples. And we're going to build a wall on our border and to keep them out. No, I don't think so. So we're demanding that is not the case, that everyone comes, and we transition to a society where everyone is supported, and we make sure that those people on the front line get their fair share. And this is specifically demanding reparations and acknowledging indigenous sovereignty. So just to make that like very clear, that we are demanding that, because obviously we have done so, and we, like the U.S. government, has done so much wrong to these peoples, that it needs to be, those wrongs need to be righted, and we're not going to move on until that happens. We can't.
Right. Again, because racism is systematic in this country. It is ingrained in the systems that we have in place right now. So we need a fourth demand to try to right that, because it's not enough to be like, okay, everybody, don't be racist. Like, no, we need our systems to not be racist, because Black and brown communities are in a cycle of poverty. They're the ones that are going to be hurt by the natural disasters. They're the ones that are going to be affected by things like pandemics. And we need to recognize the humanity in everybody, just like we're doing right now. Like, people are like, hey, I can go outside. I'm healthy. I'm not going to get sick. I have a strong immune system. Yeah, but that's not everybody. Same thing with climate change. We emit more carbon emissions in the global north than the global south, but the global south are going to be the folks that are going to be hardest hit by our emissions. That's not fair. And we need to acknowledge that as protesters in the global north, it is our duty in solidarity with those folks that we stand up against this.
Absolutely. And
so anyway,
if you are listening to this, I'm guessing you're probably in the US, or in the global north at least, and you are in the heart of the empire, and that is a powerful place to be. We are like right here at the heart where power lies, and perfectly staged to be the most effective.
Yes, it's all about the power within. We have to recognize that we have the power within us to make a change, and if we exercise our power within to make a change, it'll give power to other people that have it within them as well. Instead of a power over structure, which is what we experience right now, whereas the government has power over us. That's what we think. We can't do anything. We can.
And power with each other, building communities, building, having an affinity group. You have power if you are with other people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I don't think there's any more questions. So I'm going to say we should wrap this up and move on to Instagram.
Absolutely.
But for everyone here at Facebook, thanks for tuning in. Colin, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me about all this really important stuff. And if you're interested in joining Extinction Rebellion or learning more about it, message us on Facebook, check out our website, sign up for our mailing list. I don't know. I mean, we've got support calls going on every week right now, where you can hop on a Zoom call and just kind of talk about how you're doing in this pandemic. It's not even like, we're not even talking about things that Colin and I just talked about. We're more talking about how this pandemic is affecting you personally. to start building those connections with each other. So stay connected to us. We want you here. We need you. So thank you so much, Colin. I'll see you in a
Thank
few
you.
minutes on Instagram.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
bye.
Erinn. Bye.
Bye.